toasted, joking too, sipping and roasting. Yeah, that's what we do. Set 'em up, knock 'em down, make that cherry glow. Whiskey and cigars, the gentleman's cologne.
Cheers, y'all.
Well. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this fine radio program, podcast, and video extravaganza.
Hi, Mom.
Known internationally, thank you, as the world famous Smoking and Toasting. We are, boy, have we got a show for you today. First of all, you get to do without that annoying Ian Barry guy, because he's on a Caribbean cruise someplace, and
Oh, it's his turn.
it's his turn, and I have further good news, and that is accompanying him apparently and his wife on this Caribbean cruise are Alan Denny, a friend of the show, and his wife, which means chances are close to zero that Alan will pod crash this episode of the show because they're off in the Caribbean somewhere. And I'll tell you a little more about that as we go, but we have quite a show because in Ian's chair this week, doing the guest co-host duties is none other than our good friend and our wine expert for the show, Mr. Marc Borel. Marc, welcome back.
Hi, Mom.
It's always great to have you on the show.
And
this will be a little different because you'll be in
I'm in a weird spot in the room.
In a different role, too. So it's going to be good. And then, as if all of that weren't enough, we're joined today by our special guest, Mr. Barry Brinegar. Barry is with RD1 Spirits. The first time I sampled anything from RD1 was at the Whiskey Social this last year. And I will admit, I had a lot of whiskey that night. I sampled a number of different things, but I do remember really liking what I had. I don't remember which one it was. So we'll get to all of that, and we'll get a chance to do some sampling, and I'm really excited about all of it. Marc also brought a bottle of something that's in the refrigerator right now.
Empty-handed.
Yeah, and we have beers, and it's just going to be one of those. Shows. If we don't get enough to drink on today's show, something has gone terribly wrong.
Happy Monday
somewhere. Yes, absolutely. So, Barry, I want to talk to you about RD1. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Marc, first of all, how are you doing, and how are things at the Rainbow Lodge?
Oh, everything's great. Busier than ever. We're gearing up for Valentine's right now.
That's got to be a big thing.
It is.
Now, my wife and I never go out for Valentine's
on
Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. We choose another day, adjacent somewhere and go out that day. So I would imagine if other people do that Valentine's is kind of like a crazy week or so, right?
And it's always been a crazy week, but these past few years have been doubly crazy because they moved the Super Bowl.
Oh, right.
And so typically the Super Bowl was this weekend or so.
Yeah.
And then
you'd have Valentine's Day.
We'd have a break, and then, right. And now, because of the Super Bowl and where it lands, it's just one big continuous thing.
Yeah. Terry, did you catch how many times he said Super Bowl during that last sentence? Because I think the accountants have to cut a check for the NFL.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The big game.
the big game. I don't know. We have no problem saying it, but they do get really crazy about it. I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There is no way if you are a Ford dealer that you can do the Super Bowl of savings. You will be.
No.
They will.
Oh, no.
They will bring up.
They've even started getting things like the big game and stuff too.
Oh yeah,
they've
started trying to trademark those. So,
As is every furniture store in town.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Super Bowl of mattresses.
Yeah, that's right.
Sounds almost frightening. Anyway, we are excited about the show today because in addition to tasting spirit expressions from RD1, and in addition to tasting whatever delicious looking bottle that is that Marc brought with him, we will also be having some beers. And I have to say, Ian completely picked the wrong show to be going because Ian loves big beers.
Yeah.
And that's all we have today.
I saw that when reading the show rundown yesterday.
Yes,
I was like, oh, yeah.
From Drekker Brewing Company, we'll be trying their Ectogasm IPA. From Klaus Brewing Company here in Houston, Texas, we'll be trying their Doppelsticke. It's an Imperial Altbier style ale,
Okay.
which should be interesting. And then, as if all of that weren't enough, from Prairie Artisan Ales, we'll be trying their Espresso Marty. It's a barrel-aged Imperial Stout. And as you can see from the can when we get there, on the can is a martini glass, like a chocolate martini looking guy
Man,
with
it's
a face
all the
on
rage
it.
right now, these
Yeah,
espresso martinis.
we're really excited about all of that. We'll tell you about some cigars to watch for. We will also, of course, be tasting RD1. We have a mystery beverage coming up, but before we get to that, I'll give you our drinking news teaser headline for the day, and we don't have Ian here. Mark unfortunately missed the memo about bringing a ukulele with
forgot
him.
the ukulele.
Yeah, so I'll just give you this without any musical accompaniment. But the drinking news teaser headline for today is, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Because you had a bad day. Yeah, and that's
day.
musical in and of itself, and we'll get to all of that. When we do drinking news later on in the show, that, of course, is the segment where we bring you stories from the news that are sometimes, maybe even often, not always about drinking, but that are always best enjoyed if you've been drinking. And by the time we get there, we will have been. I can assure you that. So we'll start drinking with the mystery beverage. And I've already poured these, and I'm going to pass them around. And with the mystery beverage, basically what we do is only the person that brought it, in this case me, knows what it is. So we will sample it, sort of a blind taste test and smell test and all that goes along with that.
Oh.
And then we will see what we think we have here. I'm already getting a huge grin from Mark. I don't know whether that's a grin of, oh boy, this is going to be good, or oh boy, this is not going to be good.
Well,
Champagne.
on first impression, I thought, wow, okay, so this is not the mystery beverage that I've had here on the many times that I've been here.
Right. It's usually like a seltzer or something,
It's
right?
usually something. The last time it was that terrible red
Oh, yeah,
yes.
the red thing. You were here for Red Day.
red
Yeah,
day.
yeah, that was
Pirate water.
Yeah.
That was it.
Ian brought that, didn't he?
No, that was me.
Oh, that was you.
That was me.
Okay, yeah, that was Terry, our engineering producer. So, no, in this case, it has a little bit different nose to it for sure. So go ahead and
Champagne.
Barry, you have any thoughts on what you've tasted? And
This reminds me of a cider. It's very delicious. It's refreshing. Nice bubbly.
Mark, your thoughts?
Okay, a question. How long ago was it poured? Not in a bad way. I'm just curious.
I would say about 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay. So here's what I'm getting from this. This tastes like something that a restaurant might use on Sunday mornings.
Like for cocktails, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a mixing type beverage. I think it's obviously some sort of wine related something. I don't think there's any distilled anything in there. Dry but tart. And I'll just say this. I've got a brilliant bottle waiting for you.
Okay, good. And I'm guessing the bottle will be superior to this.
Well, I think that'll be up to you.
Terry, thoughts?
I could see where he's going with the Sunday morning. I think that I could taste this in a mimosa immediately. Like this would be really good with a mimosa. I mean, it's not offending, it's not, yeah.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, you're all kind of on it.
Okay.
The crispness of the, sort of apple, sort of fruit taste. They really nailed it with the Sunday morning mimosa thing. What we are trying is actually Brute Bubbles.
Yeah.
Champagne in a can from Dark Horse.
Champagne in a can.
Now, it's dry, lively, and citrus, it says. And it is basically, they call this half a bottle. So now that you know what that is, does that connect any dots?
Yes, absolutely it does. And it's because it's these first of all, wine in a can is making a big resurgence. And in Europe,
Wait a second. Let me just resurgence indicates that it was big at one time.
That's what I was thinking.
It had a moment.
Okay.
A few, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago or so.
Okay.
And it fizzled. And now you're seeing a lot of producers starting to put wine in can.
You've seen it almost completely in beer. Like very few beers are bottling now, craft beers.
Right.
You see almost all of them
Well,
have gone to cans.
it's easier and cheaper.
Yes, exactly.
To use a can than you do a bottle. And in Europe, they would do these tiny little 4-ounce cans all over the place. You can find lots of different things. This particular producer is known for many things in California, but it's you can see that it's California appellated, which means they're sourcing their fruit from all over the state.
Okay.
Not just a specific part of it.
Yeah, Modesto, California, Dark Horse Wines.
Which also leads me to believe that it's probably owned by Gallo.
Oh, it could be.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which is neither a good or bad thing. It's just Gallo has a huge presence in Modesto specifically.
It's interesting on the can where they describe it, they give their Modesto, California, Dark Horse Wines, Modesto, California, 375 milliliters, and then it calls it carbonated wine.
Okay.
How is
interesting.
carbonated wine different from what we would call
Sparkling.
sparkling wine or champagne?
So in Champagne and in many other areas, the way that wine is made is that it goes through a secondary fermentation. They basically bottle whatever thing they have. They add sugar and yeast, and it ferments again in the bottle. They crack the top, put a cork in it, and let it go. That's the champagne method, champenoise method, traditionnel. But there are some places like in northern Italy and for a less expensive style of wine, well, they'll actually run carbon dioxide through the juice,
Which is where it gets the
wine.
bubbles in that
and
case,
that's where you get carbonated wine
Okay.
instead of.
And you mentioned it being less expensive. Is it considered, I would guess, less desirable as well, right?
Yes, probably, especially to a lot of like high-end consumers. I would think so. Someone who's used to drinking this is It's obvious this is not champagne.
Right.
It's obvious this is not Spanish sparkling or
Right.
Whatever. And that's where I was getting it. Not only that, but the bubbles are massive.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
are
are.
much bigger than what you're used to from sparkling wine, correct?
Is
Yeah.
that in a 6-pack sold or in a 12-pack? How is that sold individually?
This particular one, my wife actually bought this just individually, but I do believe they come in either a 4 or a 6-pack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most likely. What's your take on this just in general? Assuming this is a, $2.5, $3 can.
So if I were at a festival, if I were outside at some sort of music thing, if I were at the theater, I'd have no problem having this. If there was anything else, if I were on a budget, this is a great thing. I'm curious to know what the alcohol content of.
Let me see if it
is as
says
well.
that easily here. 10% by volume.
Okay, so that's
All right.
just about under average, just slightly under average. But yeah, I'd have no problem with that. But I think that more so than that, this is what you'd mix juice with.
Yeah,
on some
and I
wines.
think that would actually work really well with a mimosa or Bellini or something like
because
that.
it does have a little bit of sweetness. It does have, and those bubbles are so big, it'll break up the juice up. Yeah, I think that's exactly what it's.
Really good. Well, very interesting. Thank you. This, I think, has actually been one of our better mystery beverages because they have a tendency to not always be things that we wind up being too excited about. But in this case, I could see that kind of has its place. Doesn't necessarily replace a nice bottle or even an inexpensive nice bottle of sparkling wine.
But in the right application, it's just fine.
At a concert or something.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be a bad deal at all.
It cans well without adding artificial sweetness.
Right. I'm not getting that
Yeah.
artificial taste in
Not
there
yet.
anywhere. Not yet.
You probably will.
All right. And on that note, we will take a break. We got a big show for you today. Lots of expressions of RD1 to be sampling here. We have some beers to be sampling. Oh, and our friend Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top is releasing his own cigar line and humidors. So we'll tell you about that coming up. You are watching and listening to Smokin' and Toastin', craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. We will be right back. Welcome back. It is Smoking and Toasting. Our show is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. My name is Cruze. My guest co-host this week is Mr. Marc Borel, our wine expert and resident buddy of the show. And we also have Barry Brinegar with us today. Barry is with RD1. We'll be talking about RD1 spirits quite a bit here as the show progresses. So
Thank you.
We are glad to have you. Today is show number 366. And
Already?
Without Ian here, I am unable to completely, assure you with any kind of certainty that we are in fact halfway to 400.
3/4 of the way, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if Ian were here, he could tell us. And
2/3.
Next week, I'm sure he'll bring us up to speed. But 366 episodes of this program. Do you realize how many beers, how many spirits that is?
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And at least one...
It's research. It's all good research.
Doing it for you.
And at least one cigar every show, because we always like to tell you a little bit about what we've had the opportunity to smoke. And I had something very interesting this week, an Arturo Fuente Casa Cuba Divine Inspiration Corona Gorda. Now, before he passed away, perhaps with some guidance from beyond in the afterlife, legendary cigar maker Carlos Fuente Sr. of the world-renowned Arturo Fuente Cigar Company reportedly dictated the blend of a new cigar to his factory over the telephone. The cigar turned out to be the Arturo Fuente Casa Cuba Divine Inspiration, a 6 1/8 by 47 ring gauge Corona Gorda that turns out to be what I smoked and what I want to talk to you about this week. As I mentioned, the cigar measures 6 1/8 inches long. Ring gauge is 47, which is around the sweet spot for me. I like the smaller ring gauges. It has a pale brown color, as you can see in the photo here. And the pre-light aromas are mostly hay with a hint of sawdust and leather. So I really wasn't quite sure what to expect from this one. The other factor, of course, is Fuente. I can't think of when I've ever been disappointed by a Fuente cigar. So I've had reasonably high expectations when I lit up the Divine Inspiration. And then there's also the name. If a cigar was divinely inspired, you wouldn't expect it to be a dud by any means. So I guess because of the idea that the blend was inspired from above, other than allowing that it was rolled in the Dominican Republic, Fuente doesn't tell us anything about the source of tobacco in this cigar. We just have to trust and believe, I guess, which does sound like something from a sermon in church. I used a small punch and lit the cigar. There was definitely not a pepper blast of Nicaraguan or any other origin. The Divine Inspiration did pick up a little pepper as it smoked, but it was definitely not similar to what you get from Nicaraguan tobacco. The Divine Inspiration was creamy from the start, almost like the flavor of melted marshmallows in the top of a cup of hot chocolate. There was also a distinct note of earth from the beginning as well, but it was quite different from the sort of darker, loamy earth that I've referred to in about previous cigars. Not as rich, but equally pleasant. And as for the burn, a little uneven, at least at first, but manageable. One side did seem to burn a little faster than the other, so I kept an eye on it in case I needed to touch it up. By the second, third, cedar and a hint of cinnamon joined the flavor party. A distinct tobacco note, which reminded me of the smell of bundled leaves in a tobacco curling barn, and wheat. And then the burn remained uneven, but I still didn't really need to touch it up. It seemed to be slowly moving towards correcting itself. But by about the halfway point, I said, heck with it, and I used my lighter to even out the burn line, where one stubborn part of the wrapper leaf didn't want to burn quite right. In the final third, I was able to identify the pepper as more of a white pepper, and a hint of roasted espresso beans joined the mix. There was also a kind of a mellow floral note on the finish. That was definitely a different flavor profile than what I find in what I usually smoke. I would peg the strength of the Divine Inspiration a little above mild, but the white pepper tilts it more towards medium-bodied. The cigar produced plenty of smoke, and once I made the correction with my lighter, burned pretty well the rest of the way down. Clearly a well-blended cigar, whether the inspiration was divine or not. It's a real change of pace for me in the flavor department, and I enjoyed that. The Fuente Casa Cuba Divine Inspiration Corona is a $9 to $10 cigar. I enjoyed it very much. Price to quality, a solid 5. And our price to quality is a 1 to 10 scale, but a 5 means you got exactly what you paid for. So that's a good ranking, unless the cigar is super expensive, and then maybe. Yeah. All right, we'll take a break. We'll be back to do some whiskey tasting, my friends. RD1 in the studio with Smoking and Toasting. Welcome back, my friends. It is Smoking and Toasting. Our show is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. If you just joined us, Ian is in the middle of the ocean somewhere, but don't worry, he's on a cruise ship. Wait a second. I don't know if that inspires extra confidence or not. Now, Mark, you just got back from a cruise, didn't you?
Yeah.
How was yours, and where did you go?
It was fantastic. I left out of Puerto Rico.
Oh, nice.
And went to 4, which I had never been to, and I went to 4 places that I've never been. I went to Aruba, Curacao, Martinique, and St. Kitts. And man, did I drink a bunch of rum.
I bet you did. How fun.
That was great. I've become a big fan of these Virgin cruises. There's no kids. There's lots of really great food on there. And I had booked this one in September when I went with a group of friends. And I went by myself. And I had just the best time. I went to a banana plantation.
Oh, how fun.
Of all things. And I thought, well, okay, this will be interesting. And I was blown away by, obviously not very much tech there, but just how cool it was that their science behind the growing of the plants. And it's a grass, by the way.
Yeah,
banana's a grass. It was.
I did not know that.
Just a really cool experience to be there. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, sounds like fun. Well, I don't know how much fun Ian's having. In fact, he has communicated with me exactly once from the cruise ship, and it was a text that included the word Cruze beers, not cruise like me, but cruise spelled like the cruise beers. And then he sent this photo, which I think
I saw that.
I think sums up exactly what what Ian was doing or enjoying or not enjoying from the cruise. If you're listening to the audio of this, he does not look pleased.
He does not.
He does not look pleased. So,
well, they have to please the masses.
Yeah.
There, they can't get too crazy.
Yeah. So I can't imagine him, though, on like a week-long cruise without access to beer that he actually likes. And so hopefully he can find something somewhere, That's when you go, a Sam Adams, please, anything,
Yeah, but you know what? I had difficulty, not difficulty, but there were the wine list on these things. Again, they have to please the masses. So you get a little bored with some of their offerings that they had. I ended up drinking a bunch of gin.
Really?
On the ship, yeah. In fact, I drank 2 bars out of the gin that I really like.
Gin on the ship and then rum at the ports of call.
That's right. Yeah,
I love it. That sounds like a party. Well, we're doing neither gin nor rum today. We are doing whiskey, and Barry Brinegar is here. Barry, you are the co-owner or co-founder,
yep.
and you're the national brand ambassador for RD1, which is based in Lexington, Kentucky.
That's right.
And how did you get involved as a co-founder of a bourbon and a whiskey company?
Well, I was born in Kentucky,
Okay. So that pretty much explains it, right?
And that's that story.
My friend Rowdy was telling me today that the airport in Lexington, which I've never flown into, it's basically a bourbon-themed airport. Is that right?
It is. They have a liquor store right there in the airport. You can buy your favorite expression.
I'm not flying the plane.
Or maybe you are.
Yeah, maybe.
Wow.
Well, that's
so cool.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. So you are from Kentucky. You got involved in RD1, and when was this actually founded?
The company was founded in January of 2020, right before
Wow.
COVID.
I was going to say good timing there.
Yeah. Wasn't it great?
How did you manage to? Maybe being founded just before them was actually an advantage because you maybe didn't have all this machinery in place yet and by that I mean all the distribution and all the contracts and everything that would have to be honored.
What I tell people is that this brand willed itself to come back to life because we should not have come to market, established a brand in January of 2020, and had a product on the shelf in October of 2020. So magical things had to happen. We had to buy still, we had to install it, we had to get liquid, we had to get cost of goods, corks and bottles, and have it approved on a shelf in 10 months. So, it was miraculous that it happened.
Wow.
And just super fun. We hit the ground running, and we haven't stopped yet.
That's awesome. What's the first expression you want to have us taste here today?
Yep. So what we're going to be tasting is a Kentucky straight bourbon, and this same mash bill is going to be finished in a French oak, finished in Amberana, and finished in a double oak and maple. We're doing just the straight bourbon right now.
Okay.
That mash bill, 70% corn, 21% rye, 9% malted barley, and this is 98 proof. So I needed to do a cork pop. This is a sample bottle.
Yeah,
it's a twist
so
cap.
it doesn't really. There we go. That's very well done. Thank you, Sarah. Mark, I know you are involved in doing some barrel picks and different things with whiskeys and stuff. Is whiskey something you were knowledgeable about when you first started in your career?
No,
so it's something you had to learn along the way, right?
It was wine and wine only
Yeah.
at the time. And then as I progressed in my career, as I became responsible for more and more of the program, I learned more and more about the different things like bourbon. And since then, we've taken a few trips to Kentucky. We went to Vermont and picked a barrel of rye from up there. And so I'm really interested in tasting this.
Well, it's kind of the same for me. Not that I hadn't had, or drank whiskey before, but I was really much more of a tequila guy and a rum guy when we first started this show. So a lot of the things that I have learned about whiskey, about bourbon, I've really only learned in the last several years since we've been doing this. So that causes me to say things that make absolutely no sense at times. So here's my disclaimer. But this first one is the straight bourbon whiskey from RD1, and you mentioned. Tell me again the mash bill on this.
70% corn, 21% rye, and 9% malted barley. So in order to be a bourbon, it has to be at least 51% corn or more in the mash bill. In order for it to be a Kentucky straight bourbon, it has to be made in Kentucky, has to be warehoused in Kentucky for 2 years to be a straight designation. And then this is not age stated, so we know it's at least 4+ years old.
This you certainly can pick up the corn and a hint of the rye on the nose for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I've become a pretty big fan of rye, so that's a welcome note for me.
Yeah.
That's really pleasant. Really,
it's got a really lovely burn to it.
Yes.
that I like a lot. Oftentimes, these bourbons that are high in corn become just too syrupy, too sweet, and I think that little pinch of rye, it's almost like sprinkling pepper on a pork,
right?
On a piece of pork.
It
gives
really
you a
kind of
flavor.
grounds it almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is lovely. This is just. I don't really like using this word. We use it a lot with beers when we say drinkable. In other words, not only is it good tasting, but it feels like
it's easy,
it's not. Yeah, it's not something that you're gonna like. This is gonna take me a while. You know what I mean?
What'd you say? 90 proof? 91?
It's 98 proof.
98.
And what I love about it is it has character. When you look at that flavoring, that secondary grain, that flavoring grain being rye, obviously you're going to be very sweet on that front end, but that rye gives for me a little cracked peppercorn on that mid palate.
To me, the rye is almost what makes this, even though it's not like. As Mark was saying, it's more like it's sprinkled in there than it is a really overwhelming part of the flavor profile. But I think it does just enough to make this totally work as an easy to drink and very pleasant.
This is old fashioned.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. This would make a great
without a
old
doubt.
fashioned.
Do you have you mentioned the higher rye content? Do you have a plan to produce a rye?
Yes, we do. In fact, right now we have a barrel pick program. Right now, for this year, I'm supposed to sell 50 barrels. So anybody out there want to buy a barrel pick, give me a call. I'm your Huckleberry. But in that program, we've got 95.5 Kentucky straight rye mash bills. So we do currently have rye in our inventory.
Well, that's
So
great.
was this the first expression that you came out with?
No, actually, we came out with a burr rye. We came out with an 8-year rye that was mixed with a 7-year bourbon, and it was 114 proof. It was so delicious. It had so much character, but it had some beautiful creme brulee notes. Absolutely delicious.
I'm getting a little bit, as I do a little more of this, getting a little more vanilla.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Almost like a vanilla, but it's not vanilla like you would get in a rum. It's and maybe it's the rye that's changing the nature of it, but it just
For me, it's a little toasted vanilla.
Like
there you
toasted
go.
vanilla,
Thank
that's
you.
the word.
Thank you.
That's
That's exactly right.
But can you talk about the barrel program?
Absolutely, yeah. So the barrel program, we're right now in 16 markets across the country, and we'll be in 26 markets by the end of this year. We're able to sell barrels to any one of those markets, and so the barrel program, I can mail samples to you. You can come to our brand destination in Lexington, Kentucky. I can even fly to you. So, we're very versatile in how
I'm
we
looking
do
at you, colleagues.
Yeah, yeah.
In the market.
Exactly. Because this is, I think this would be wonderful. And like you said, Mark, for old fashions, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would really, really work. Let's go ahead and jump into the next, into the first beer, because our beer selections are going. Oh, and you know what? I actually was going to do them in a different order, but that's okay because I'm anxious to try this one. Yeah, no, I'm anxious to try this one and try it maybe where we can go back to the whiskey just a little bit. This is the Klaus Brewing Company's Doppelsticke. It's an Imperial Altbier style ale. And the reason I wasn't going to try it first is all our beers are big today, but I usually still try to go from smallest to biggest. So this one will jump us up. In fact, I think as I look at this can here, I think we are talking, 8% alcohol by volume. So that's big, but not too big. And it'll be very interesting, I think, to go back. And I might have you pour me just another tiny bit of that so we can go back and forth. We enjoy doing that sometimes between the spirits and the beers. But Klaus Brewing is a brewery that's in our home city here in Houston. And they do not have an IPA. They really specialize more in Bavarian and German style beers. So they have a number of Pilsners, Hefeweizens, darker ales, things that are just a little more in that sort of vein. And as a result, they're one of Ian's favorites, and he, of course, isn't here today. So, Ian, looking at you, brother.
Cheers.
So this is the Altbier, and I never know what to think when they say Altbier because that could mean a lot of different things.
I've had interesting alt beers in Dusseldorf.
Oh, nice.
That typically are poured directly from the barrel, and I think this is something that will stand up to all of those
ones that you've had direct from the barrel. Yeah, this is actually quite good. You get roasted malt like right up front, and then you get a little of it on the finish as well. But it's got a dark malt taste to it, just like you would expect from the way that it looks, and it's really quite good. It's I just can't get over the roastedness.
There's a lot of roasted character. I was going to say smoky, but it's not at all smoky. It's more roasty.
Yeah, earthy. I'm getting some earthy notes in it, too.
All right, now it's going to be interesting to go back to the Kentucky Straight Bourbon from RD1 after this. Wow, it brings more maltiness to the bourbon, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, it does.
Kind of what you would, I guess, expect it to do, but it isn't always the case when we go back and forth with these sometimes. But
well, it kind of tones down the sweetness of together as well.
They actually pair quite well together. It makes the whiskey a little mellower, I think.
I would agree. Really narrows down that cracked peppercorn that you typically get on the mid palate. Yeah.
Yep. And then to go back again to the beer. So then it kind of mellows out the beer a little bit. You get a little less of the super prominent roasted note. It's still very pleasant though. These actually go very well together.
This is
very complimentary.
Really, I like that. That's always fun to do and works for us a surprisingly high amount of the time, to be honest, where these things complement each other. The one thing we always love to do is pair an IPA with a rye because those two like hold hands and make out. I mean, it's just there's just something about those two together. And IPA doesn't go with everything. That's for sure. Sometimes the bitterness of the hops will really fight with things. It fights with certain cigars. A lot of times I will not drink an IPA if I'm smoking a cigar because they just aren't necessarily going to match up. But in this case,
do you think it's the bitterness that doesn't work well with the sweet?
Yes, I think it's the bitterness of the hop in the IPA just impacts the overall flavor of the cigar and makes the cigar bitter. Because a bitter IPA is a wonderful thing. A bitter cigar is not a wonderful thing. You know, it's definitely not where you're headed, not what you're looking for. So, well, I like both of these quite a lot, and I will have to buy Ian one of these for when he gets back because this seems right up his alley based on what we know his flavor profile is and what he likes. Mark, real quick, we have just a minute left in the segment, but when you're making beer choices for the restaurant, obviously you want a mix of styles. Beyond that, what are you looking for? You say, hey, it's time to change out and add a couple of new beers. What are you looking for?
Well, the first thing with our draft selection is that I'm looking for local. We really embrace there's so many really great local breweries
There
around
really
here.
are in our area.
And within a few mile radius of the Rainbow Lodge, there's tons of them. And so I look for that. And I look for something seasonality. Is it fun enough? Should I bring something for Christmas or October? Or,
Right,
that kind of thing.
Well, now we're going to start thinking summer because it's right around the
That's
corner.
right, yeah.
And that's always an exciting beer time as well.
Have
All right,
fun.
we are going to take a break. These were both fantastic. We have more to come, including more expressions of RD1. And at some point here, we'll get into the IPA from Drekker Brewing Company called Ectogasm.
Ooh,
That's all coming
nice.
up. And this is Smoking and Toasting. Welcome back at Smoking and Toasting, our program number 366 this week, by the way. Our show is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. And during the break, our engineering producer, Terry, made a statement that I think might be a good slogan for the show. He said, it's like riding a bike when you've been drinking.
I love it. Yeah.
Is it legal to bicycle under the influence? It's not, is it?
I don't.
It is not.
Really?
There's
Yeah.
no motor.
Yeah,
Right.
like who
But
you
you
gonna hurt?
can't walk in public drunk.
True.
So
true.
you
So it's
can't
more
ride
like
a
a
bike.
public intoxication.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
That,
Jeez, I'm in trouble.
that makes
I'm glad I Ubered.
One of the bicycle cops will pull you over.
Yeah.
You know.
yeah. You got to wonder too, like how wasted would you have to be to pull your bicycle off the side of the road and call an Uber? That just creates a great mental image, doesn't it?
Could you even do it?
Could you even do it? Exactly.
You gotta
ready
get
to
the big
put
one
this-
so you have a place to put the bike.
I'm gonna
in the
put
back.
this on top of the car.
Yeah. we may possibly find out before the program's over.
Let's go.
So you poured us a second expression here of RD1, and RD stands for Registered Distillery. Is that right?
Registered distillery, yeah. Number one. So back in 1862, President Lincoln needs to re-register distilleries that hadn't paid taxes since the Whiskey Rebellion of 1900 or
By the way-
1800.
By the way, kids, if you don't think whiskey's interesting, you're just studying the wrong parts. This is
That's right.
interesting
This is
stuff.
great.
100%. So in Lexington, Kentucky, the first registered distillery was called the Ashland Distillery. Every tax district had an RD1, RD2, RD3.
Ah, cool.
In Lexington, Kentucky, the first registered distillery was the Ashland Distillery.
Okay. So you guys are RD1
Yep.
in Lexington. And this next expression is a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, but it's finished in French oak. Mark, why is French oak such a big deal?
It's a big deal in France.
Okay.
And
In fairness, they love Jerry Lewis in France. That doesn't make him funny.
they do. And there's some producers who are sourcing American oak for that reason.
Right.
But French typically has a tighter grain.
Okay, so that's the reason that it's
Yeah.
thought of to be such
Yeah,
a thing.
and these specific barrels come from Central France. Is that right?
They do, yes. That's exactly right. And you know, I've had people ask me, where does French oak come from? Yeah, well, it comes from
France.
From France.
Netherlands.
So do you think these are some of the same trees that are making, say, barrels for cognac and for Armagnac and
Yeah,
maybe even Bordeaux?
I have to believe that because when you look at oak trees, there's only a certain amount of oak that is even usable for barrels.
Yeah.
And then the rest of it, you make furniture, you make flooring, but there's only a certain amount of that's usable.
I have to say, this has a very sophisticated nose to it. It's just really, it feels like, or it smells like there's just a lot going on in there, but it's not like, it doesn't smell like too much. It just smells like this is going to be kind of a delight for the senses, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that the sweetness is there. It's a little more muted than what we've had before. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't drink as hot as you would think.
No, it
is.
definitely doesn't. Yeah. Is this the same in terms of proof?
It's 101 proof, so it's just a
even
little
more.
bit,
Wow.
little bit higher proof. But what I love about it is it tamps down that cracked peppercorn. Like Mark, what you just said is that it drinks lower proof, but it's more complex. There's a lot more going on with it.
I would not have guessed this was 100 plus proof.
There's a creamy caramelly-ness to it that kind of brings it down, I think.
Yeah, this was the first wood finish series that rose to the top. And it was the very first one that we came out with other than our straight bourbon.
What I think is interesting about this, for someone who is kind of doing what I did back when we first started the show, which was really trying to go, okay, what am I tasting? Why am I tasting it? Where is it coming from? What are the different notes that I'm getting? This is one that I can tell you, if you're more of a novice in that, you really can taste the wood in this.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely tell what note that is. And now we know it's French oak. And that I get maybe why that would have been important for this, because a different kind of oak or a different wood of any kind would have made this taste quite differently.
Yeah, and Cruze, the one thing when you think about bourbon, American bourbon, is that 50 to 70% of that flavor is coming from that wood, depending on how old the barrel is. We're just changing the equation. We're just adding more of that wood expression.
And when you use the barrel, do you also at times add staves?
Yeah, and that's what we do. We actually add staves into the existing barrel. That helps keep our cost of goods down lower. So this is a $69 bottle, where some wood finishes are 100 plus.
And just out of curiosity, the first straight bourbon whiskey that we tasted, what's the retail on that?
59.
So 59, this one's 69.
Yep.
I would say that puts it right in a sweet spot, I think,
definitely.
for how delicious this is. This is a really wonderful bourbon.
I need a Boulevardier with this now.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it too. Let's take a break, and we will return. You are watching and listening to Smoking and Toasting. For those of you who only get the first hour of the show, write your radio station, tell them you want hour two, and in the meantime, you can find us wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube. We'll be right back at Smoking and Toasting. Welcome back at Smoking and Toasting. Our show is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. It's show number 366. Our guest host is Mr. Marc Borel, friend of the show and our resident wine expert, among other things. He's already shown himself to be far more knowledgeable than me about whiskey. So that's a good thing to have him here. And then our guest, of course, Barry Brinegar with RD1, the Registered Distillery 1 from Lexington, Kentucky. We've tried a couple of your expressions so far, and I just have to say, I loved that last one.
Thank you.
Liked the first one a lot, loved the last one. That one really was right in the sweet spot for my particular palate. So looking forward to trying more. Drinking news also coming up this hour, and cigar to watch for. EP Carrillo is back with what looks like another winner. The brand's first Cigar Aficionado Cigar of the Year was the Encore Majestic from EP Carrillo. It was named the #1 cigar of 2018. We've talked about that here on the show because our friend Alan Denny, who is currently cruising in the middle of the ocean with Ian, worked for EP Carrillo when that cigar got the #1 spot. And he talked about how it changed everything, that #1 ranking. It changed everything the following year. They couldn't, keep it in stock, and everybody wanted it, and it was in high demand. So getting the #1 cigar is a pretty big deal. Well, now the company's expanding that Encore line and creating a new version with a far darker wrapper, and this looks right up my alley, called Encore Black. It features a dark Connecticut broadleaf Maduro wrapper and binder from Mexico's San Andres Valley. So San Andres, that tobacco is used a lot as wrapper tobacco. Now it's being used as a binder just under this layer of Connecticut broadleaf Maduro. And then the filler is a blend of Nicaraguan tobaccos from Condega, Esteli, and Jalapa. The original Encore is made entirely from Nicaraguan tobacco, so this one varies a little bit with the San Andres binder. Anyway, in terms of strength, it's blended to be medium to full, stronger than the original Encore, which is more medium, and Encore Black comes in only one size, a 5 3/8 by a 52 ring gauge, and a suggested retail price of $17 each. Now, the traditional Encore is produced year-round, but Encore Black will be made and released sporadically, with the initial release only 2,000 boxes, which is 20,000 cigars. So the company says it intends to release a total of 50,000 cigars this year, or 5,000 boxes. So if this sounds interesting to you and you see it on the shelf, you may want to snatch it up, because it's not something that's going to be sitting around for a very long time. Other things that we will tell you about cigars to watch for in next week's show, including the fact that Now, over half a dozen cigar makers are creating different cigar makers are creating a special Year of the Dragon cigar to celebrate the Chinese Year of the Dragon. So we'll talk about all of those choices that you may have. We'll do that on next week's show. In the meantime, we have another expression of this bourbon board. And given your track record so far, I'm very excited because we're now going to do. Describe this one for me. What are we looking at here?
Well, this is a wild adventure. And I want you to keep in mind, this is the same mash bill. So all we've done is change the equation by adding different wood.
What you're aging it in, right?
By what we're at, the wood that we're aging it into. So it's the same barrel. We're just putting Amburana staves into that existing barrel. So on the nose, I mean, you guys are getting some incredible spices.
All right. So I've heard in the show, both of you guys waxing almost poetic about Amburana wood.
Yep.
What is it about this particular wood that you guys would say is special?
Well, so I was introduced to this particular finish and this particular wood from a cachaça producer who is aging cachaça. Now, typically you find aguardiente cachaça in a blanco in a white form, and the fact that he was aging it in these Amburana casks or these barrels was just super interesting to me, and it
was giving it color, right?
Yeah, it gave not only color, but it gave it a finish, it gave it a texture, it gave it a really beautiful flavor, and man, it didn't make a really great daiquiri, but with cachaça. But now I'm starting to see it a pilot in a few other things and some finished things, and did you say you're one of the only people in Kentucky?
So we're the only, right now, we're the only that I know of. We're the only company that is having a permanent Amburana finish bourbon that's always on the shelf.
It's always available, right?
Yeah. So there might be a limited time offering that other distilleries are doing, or a single barrel pick, but we chose to go ahead and make this a permanent SKU for one of our products.
Fascinating. That's really interesting.
Multi-award win. We've won over 70 awards with all of our expressions together. So, multi-award winning. This one is a wild adventure. It's 110 proof, and it doesn't drink like 110 proof. It is very easy on the palate.
So no, but it's all the winter spices, all the baking spices. That you
totally
get from
right about this, because the first thing I got on the nose was like when I was a kid and I would come home on like an October or November day from school and you're a little bit cold and you walk in the house and your mom is baking cookies.
Oh yeah,
it's got that kind of baking spice.
An apple pie or a bread of some sort. Yeah,
yeah. So for me, on my on the aroma, I get cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, allspice. I get
without a doubt.
I get that in the taste, right?
Yeah.
You can almost taste the cookies.
This
that
is like
cooking.
a spice jamboree. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so.
And you'd mentioned apple. I get a cinnamon apple strudel. That mouthfeel. It's a nice, pleasant mouthfeel. And then on the finish, I get a coconut. I get this sweet coconut on the finish. Some people get pineapple. I don't get it on my palate. But this one is versatile. You could do a paper plain. You could do a Kentucky Mule. You could do a mint julep. It is a very versatile spirit.
Maybe I'm still in the spirit, but I want this in eggnog.
Yes. Oh my God. I've done that. I've done that. Yeah.
Would totally work.
Absolutely.
So let me make sure I understand this correctly. The mash bill in this whiskey that we're drinking, which is so different from the first two, is actually the same.
Same exact mash bill.
The only real difference is, in this case, the Amburana wood.
Yep. That's
so
accurate.
I can see why you guys were so crazy about this whole Amburana thing, because
it just changes. If you're using one distillate for everything, it just changes everything.
The last two we've had, both of which I loved, were as different as any two bourbons I've ever had.
Yes.
And it's the exact same mash bill. That's just making my head spin a little bit.
That's amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah. You can really
learn how the actual barrels make something taste compared to.
It's a lot like the wrapper on a cigar. When Ian and I were in Honduras as guests of the family that had us down there, the Aladino family, at their tobacco factory and fields, they did this thing. We were walking through part of the whole tour, and they had one of their guys that is their blender, and he had this freshly rolled cigar that had a wrapper on it. Yeah, I think it was just like a regular Connecticut wrapper. And we had each lit one and started to smoke it. And then while it was smoking, he took a Cameroon leaf and wrapped it around the cigar and secured it. We relit the cigar, and it so incredibly changed the flavor of that cigar from the wrapper leaf. So that's kind of what this reminds me of, is how incredibly different these last two expressions have been. They've both been unique and wonderful in their own way, but this is really delicious.
Thank you.
Tell me about the retail price for a bottle of this.
This one, same as the French Oak, $69.
This is that.
Wow.
Quite frankly, that's an incredible deal.
Wow.
It really is. Given what today's prices are for good bottles of whiskey, I think that's wonderful. This is Mark. Are you as impressed by this as I am?
I think this is really interesting to be able to offer something so different and so versatile.
Different is a good word because it doesn't taste like any other bourbon that I've ever tried.
Yeah.
It's just got wow.
Now, Barry, I know that this is a relatively new company for you.
Yep.
Do you have plans to produce? You mentioned about no age statements. Do you plan to produce something that does have an age statement? And are you holding something back?
Yeah, great question, Mark. We right now in our inventory, we've got some 15-year barrels that are in our inventory. You're going to see a 12-year, maybe 13-year come out, an LTO later, limited time offering later this year. We are building from the ground up a distillery in Lexington, Kentucky, right on Main Street, and you'll be able to come there. You'll be able to. We're going to distill. That'll be our research and development distillery. You'll be able to come there, do a tour, and then blend your own. So what we want to do.
Wow, that is such a cool idea.
Isn't that great?
Wow,
great opportunity. We're going to be partnering with Goodwood. It's a brewery and a restaurant concept, and we're going to share a space there. There'll be an indoor-outdoor amphitheater, and what you see on the Bourbon Trail is this. We call it the Napification of the Bourbon Trail. It's experiences. You're combining food, you're combining experiences with that distillery
tour. But you're
tour.
right. People don't have experiences for distilleries like that. When you're saying you can blend your own and do stuff, I mean, that seems like the next step.
And I will tell you, some of the most amazing food I've ever eaten was in Sonoma, California. And I was there to go to wineries and wound up in a restaurant, and the meal was just phenomenally good. Yeah. It's just stuff I'd never, tasted before. But you're right about the experience and the whole concept of making this all something that people can participate in on some level is really a good one. There are, I don't know, there's been an explosion, obviously, in distilleries in the United States in the past 10 years. And, what sets you apart, what makes you different? Obviously, what you produce and how good it is, but also the kind of experience you can offer people when they come and visit you. I think that's spectacular. Yeah. I love this, by the way. This is just, I'm not saying this just because you're here on the show, but this is something I would seek out and really enjoy. And if I was at a restaurant that had this would be my dessert.
Well, and you talk about different experiences. This is unlike anything that anybody's doing in Kentucky, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely wonderful. Mark, we've only got a couple of minutes, but I think we have time to pop the top and taste this IPA. And I don't know how this is going to go with such an unusual spirit here, but we'll give it a try and see how we do. This is from Drekker. It is their IPA called Ectogasm, which honestly sounds a little frighteningly like what might be in a sex scene in Ghostbusters.
Yes, exactly.
So I don't know how I feel about that.
I got slimed.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that the part of the scene where the ghost starts undoing his belt?
I think it is. And by the way, they're doing yet another Ghostbusters, which proves that in Hollywood, no matter how many times something that worked once fails consecutively after that, it's still somehow worth revisiting.
Hey, you know what? The cartoon was really good, but it was right after they did the first one.
Yeah. By the way, the cartoon Star Trek was pretty good too, but that doesn't necessarily mean we should have more cartoon Star Trek. All right, with just a moment left, guys, what are your thoughts on the Ectogasm India Pale Ale?
It's a lot more fruit than I expected.
Mm-hmm. Drekker is a really good producer of IPAs. In fact, we actually had an IPA of Drekker's on the show last week, and it was universally loved. It was a bigger one than this, But this is quite good, I think.
Yeah.
I was expecting something a bit bolder, a bit bigger, and richer, and it's got some texture to it. It's got some heft to it, but it's certainly not as dry as I expected it to be.
Just out of
Quick finish.
Yeah.
just out of curiosity, I'm going to go back to the whiskey, but I have to admit I don't have high expectations for this pairing.
I don't know, fruit and spice.
I don't know. It's better than I would have expected.
Maybe not so bad.
I don't know if
It works.
I don't know if I like it as much as I liked this before the IPA, but it's not bad actually, which says a lot actually I think about the whiskey. And we want to say a lot more about this whiskey. Plus we have drinking news coming up, and Mark brought a bottle that I can tell by its shape I'm very likely to be excited about, and we'll get into that next. It's Smoking and Toasted. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting, our program all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. Marc Borel is here as our guest co-host because Ian is on vacation this week. And I'd like to tell you guys a story that's actually true. In my radio broadcasting career, which ended before we started this show, I've actually been fired a number of times. It's kind of a thing that happens in radio.
Yeah.
But I will just mention that of the times that I was fired, 3 of them were immediately following a vacation.
Oh.
I came back from vacation to be fired.
Wow.
And I just want to mention that as we seem to be doing just a fine show here without Ian, who is on vacation. So,
So sorry you're missing out, baby.
I'm joking, of course, but I do hope that someone relays that to him, just to mess with him, because he does.
Well, last time it happened to me, they called me while I was on vacation.
Yeah.
And just did it over the phone.
It's better than being called while you're on the air. And I will say that has happened to me as well. So
I spent 12 years on the radio, and never did I get fired for drinking on the job. So
you certainly won't get fired here for drinking on the job. So Marc Borel is our guest co-host. Our in-studio guest today is Barry Brinegar from RD1, and we've tried really some delicious whiskeys, and we want to get back to that in a moment. But now it's time to pause for a bubbly break.
Well, absolutely.
Mark knows that I love sparkling wine. So
with Valentine's coming up, I had to bring a treat. I had to bring something really, really nice. Billicart Simon is one of those producers that is widely known for producing one of the better rosé champagne.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen this logo on other bottles that I've opened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often don't. This was a gift for my birthday a few months ago. And
you're sharing a birthday gift.
I
with
am.
us. That's a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal to be here today, and with the big Valentine's coming up, I thought pink champagne would be an appropriate thing to have.
Getting the champagne or the sparkling wine right for Valentine's Day is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
You don't have to get everything right, but you really want to get the bubbly right. That's been my experience.
Absolutely. And there's little tricks that you can do to make it right.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have if you let's say you don't want to make it known that you are not perhaps spending a lot of money, you can certainly point at something on the list for your sommelier or your server. Oftentimes wine lists will have like a number, a bin number associated with that, so you can say that bin number so your significant other doesn't really know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
But come on, if you start with bubbles, it's going to be great.
Yeah,
and it's going to be a great night.
This is wonderful.
Yeah.
This is just
delicious.
Now you mentioned this was a gift to you.
It was.
Is this something you might find on a menu at a restaurant?
Oh yeah. This is readily available in restaurants. It's going through a distributor change at the moment, but I think that's pretty much been dialed back. That's been handled at this moment, and but Billicart Simon makes really beautiful rosé champagne.
This is just a taste sensation. It's like
wine,
what it leaves on your tongue after you've swallowed, after you've experienced the finish, and then just this wonderful sort of rosé buzz on your tongue.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful.
It's berries and beautifulfulness, and just it's like spring day in champagne. It's
really a perfect Valentine's Day champagne, from the color to the flavor to. Are you a fan of sparkling wines?
I don't discriminate on any spirit. Absolutely not. I love this. This is so wonderful. Very refreshing.
It's just, Mark, what does a bottle of this cost?
$150, $175.
Yeah. So
I'll spend
This
that.
is a spendy one, but I wanted to share something nice with you guys.
you have
Thank you.
You have made my Valentine's Day already. This is fantastic.
My sweetheart.
Fantastic. Yeah.
He's flirting with
I'll
me.
send you some of those heart candy things with a little "Be Mine" on them. This is the guy you want in your camp on Valentine's Day.
That's
Trust me.
Yeah.
All right, we got to take a break. Guess what, kids? Drinking news is next. You are watching and listening to Smoking and Toasting. We'll be right back.
Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. Our program is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. And in this case, about some really amazing sparkling wine.
Woo.
In fact, I want to I want to give it. Tell me the name of this again, Mark, so I don't get this wrong.
It's called Billicart Samon.
Billicart Samon. So I'm going to give the Billicart Samon Brut Rosé Award for how incredible this is to Taylor Swift, because
yeah.
I don't want to be the only show that hasn't given her an award this year. So Taylor, we salute you. You're awesome, and thank you for being. I don't know if you guys are paying attention at the Super Bowl. Oh wait, add one to the list.
Oops.
But there is actually an over/under for how many times Taylor Swift will be on camera at the Super Bowl.
That makes absolute sense.
So,
They
Without
actually
a
have
doubt.
one on whether or not he will propose to Taylor.
That's not happening.
It's not happening,
on,
but they already
So
have one
not
on that.
happening.
No, wait.
So not happening.
Taylor Swift is the running back, right? I mean,
Yeah.
is a
Yeah,
fast
that's right.
running back.
That's right.
So it occurs to me that my favorite photo of the year was one that Swifties got really worked up about, because it was a photo of 3 different players from the Philadelphia Eagles, and they were each facing away from the camera, so you could read their names on the back of their jerseys, right? And Travis Kelce's brother, Jason Kelce, plays for the Eagles, so his was the first jersey. It says Kelce. The second one was the quarterback of the Eagles. His name was Jalen Hurts, so it said Hurts.
Oh, gosh.
And then the third one was another member of the Eagles, a running back, I believe, whose last name is Swift. So in the photo it says Kelce Hurts Swift, and the Swifties went crazy.
Hated it.
Yeah, they hated it.
There's all kinds of nuances as far as the numbers and these little things that just happenstance, and they all think that it's planned. It's something.
It's some sort of
meant to be,
conspiracy
it's in
theory.
the stars.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of things that are meant to be, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what has inexplicably become the most popular segment on this program. It's a little thing we like to
As it
call
should.
Drinking News.
Drinking news. Now it's time for drinking news. A Florida man with one arm said he had a gator for a pet. When asked about his absent arm, he said,
I had to take my gator to the vet.
drinking news, drinking news. Now it's time for drinking news.
Brilliant.
Cheers, y'all. Ian Barry on ukulele and lead vocals. That was Roberto Rivas Villar, our guest from last week's show, filling in with the Gator line. So Drinking News is a segment of the program where we bring you a story from the news. It's not from a parody site. It's from the news that sometimes, maybe even often, involves drinking and is about drinking, but is always best enjoyed if you've been drinking. And I think that's where this week's Drinking News story falls. So I was thinking this week about music, specifically about songs that I cannot stand.
Okay.
There's only actually a few of them. I've mentioned here on the show before my contempt for Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy. Mm-hmm. The saddest part of that story is that McFerrin's actually a wildly talented jazz artist, but he'll unfortunately be remembered by most people only for making one of the most annoying songs in history. But perhaps worse is a tune that had success in 2005 and 2006 from Canadian singer-songwriter Daniel Powter. This evil little track gained popularity in Europe when it was used in a Coca-Cola commercial, of course, and in the U.S. when American Idol began to play it as a goodbye song for contestants who'd been voted off the show. Sort of a rub-it-in-your-face kind of thing.
Right?
The song lyrics are as ridiculous as they are insidious. Because you had a bad day. You're taking one down. You sing a sad song, and you turn it around. You say you don't know. You tell me, don't lie. You work at a smile, and you go for a ride. Yet, as much as I can't stand the condescension and the empty platitudes of this tune, I found it playing in my head as I prepared this week's drinking news story. Because as this news item will show, it's possible to have a bad day. And then it's possible to have a really bad day.
All right.
Such was the case for an unidentified New Hampshire woman, described by neighbors as a 60-year-old resident of a Manchester housing complex, who most definitely had the kind of bad day that Daniel Powder could only dream about. Our New Hampshire woman was apparently taking out the garbage when she somehow, and I'm not making this up, fell into the dumpster and was unable to get out.
Now, wait a second. How does one fall into a dumpster?
This is the question of this entire story.
Okay, all right.
Dumpster diving.
Yeah, but one is reminded of that commercial from back in the 80s of I've fallen and I can't get up.
Right.
Now, first of all, how in God's name do you take out your hefty bags of trash and somehow wind up falling into the dumpster itself? It seems almost impossible to do, and yet this woman managed to pull it off. But then, after somehow accomplishing this incredibly difficult feat, she then apparently lost her superhuman abilities that enabled her to vault her body into the dumpster, and try as she might, she could not manage to get out. Now, this would be enough to get the Daniel Powder Bad Day song playing over and over in your head, but it's not where our unidentified woman's story ends.
I'm picturing her with a banana on her head, right? Banana peel?
Totally. That is totally the 1970s Saturday morning
That's
cartoon
right.
illustration. Yeah, well, no, the story apparently doesn't end there, unfortunately. Because the 60-year-old's bad day got even worse. Because apparently, the day she chose to catapult herself into the garbage receptacle was, in fact, trash collection day
course it was.
at the
Yes.
housing complex.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's right. No amount of singing a sad song and then you turn it around changed the fact that, according to Manchester fire officials, the complex's dumpster was ultimately dumped into a garbage truck. And then, of course, what happened next.
Ay.
According to Fire Department Battalion Chief Bob Baudet, the garbage truck then proceeded to compact the trash, including our bad day woman 4 times.
Whoa.
That's kind of smart.
Baudet told local news outlet WMUR, in 32 years, I've never seen anything like this in my whole career. It's alarming, he said, because you don't really think it's true. You don't think it really happens. But in this day and age, times are tough, and people do different things. So that was definitely one for the books.
People
I have
do
no
different
idea
things.
what he was talking about. No idea. Neighbors reportedly watched as the whole night, as neighbors will do, by the way, reportedly watched as the whole
In my
nightmare
bathroom through
scene
the blinds.
unfolded and firefighters scrambled to rescue the woman. All you heard was screaming, one resident told news reporters. My kids are home from school and they're watching, and I was like, girls, once you see her come out, I don't want you watching.
No.
That would be the time to stop, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, the crews say that the garbage truck driver had a camera in the back of his truck and thankfully noticed her inside, but not before he'd run the compactor 4 times. The good news is that the woman was rushed to a hospital in serious condition, but is expected to survive. So we have that to be happy about. Now, you might think it's callous of us here at Drinking News to find some humor in this story. But how much more unfeeling is it to write a song with such empty cliches as "You had a bad day"? Take a sad song and turn it around. One wonders if Daniel Powter will release a sequel to his Bad Day song to chronicle the woman's really bad day in our story. If so, I have actually, and unbelievably, gone so far as to help him with some suggested lyrics
All right, let's hear it.
for a follow-up version of Bad Day.
Yeah, okay.
And without Ian here to accompany me on the ukulele, I will ask you, Mark,
Okay.
if you'd rather I sing this a cappella or just read it in poetry form.
Oh, no.
Sing it.
You must sing it. This is
Sing it.
an absolute must. I think this is what Ian would want.
Well, I just want to point out, and this is a way of absolving myself, that it was Mark, in fact, who brought you what you're about to hear.
Yes.
It was his decision. And it goes a little something like this.
All right.
Because you had a bad day, you're taking out trash, you fall in the bin and get quadruple smashed. We all feel your pain. We hope you're okay. But we'll minimize this and we'll simply say, you had a bad day.
Bless her heart.
You had a really effing bad
yeah.
day. But here's a little song I wrote. Between screams, you can sing it note for note. You got compacted. But be happy. Cock-a-goo-goo, 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 cock-a-goo-goo. Reporting live from Manchester, New Hampshire, where one of the most amazing things about this story is that the garbage truck driver told fire officials that this is not the first time this has happened. And he's not even from Florida.
No.
My name is Cruze, and that is your drinking news. And usually we have Ian to top off with one more course of the drinking news song, but with him not here, no, it's all good. We're all good. So, thank you guys for tolerating another drinking news story. I just have to say, I got through that with help from this. This is wow! What a
I will bring you
wonderful-
champagne every week if we can end it.
So those
Can you
compactors don't smash all the way, is what you're saying.
Apparently,
I would.
well, so I just remember the scene in Star Wars,
That's
right?
all I could think of the whole time you were saying.
when Han Solo,
cube of person.
and it's like closing and
Or like
closing,
trying to find a broom handle to try and stop it.
because
From...
that'll work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have to admit, I've never fallen in a dumpster of trash, but I actually know people who have.
Okay, but you have to elevate yourself to do that.
Right, you have to go above the lid of the
Yes,
compactor.
to fall into
Most of the time, when you hear about someone falling into a trash dumpster, they were dumpster diving. They were looking for something in there. Maybe something they threw away they wanted to get back, or maybe they just thought they might find some hidden treasure.
Yeah.
Maybe she was a hoarder. Maybe she was a hoarder and she was reaching in to grab something that was going to complete her collection. And she fell in. I'm trying to help here.
There's that
You
bobby
take
pin.
a sad song and you turn it around. That's bad. All right,
It's my favorite visit here, by the way.
Good. I'm glad. And it involved me singing, which that's as counterintuitive as it gets. Just so you know, we have another expression we want to try here of RD1 while we still have a couple of moments in this segment, and I have a couple of glasses that you can fill. By the way, it has really been a pleasure having you on today, Barry.
Thank you, Cruze.
Not only has the whiskey been good, but we've enjoyed your company, and I'm still like kind of gobsmacked by that last one that we had. So. Yeah. We'll see what you saved for last.
All right. Well, hopefully save the best for last. This is a double finish in oak and maple, and unmistakably on the nose. I mean, you could be a novice. You're going to get maple, right?
Yeah. And get a little, almost like a smokiness to it as well. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely some earthy notes there.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So once you have swallowed and you have the finish, that's where you get the real campfire kind of a vibe.
Oh, yeah.
Coming back on the finish.
And maple. I mean, that's it's
big time
obvious.
maple.
Yeah.
This is almost like pancakes and syrup.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like an IHOP, and we've got a stack of flapjacks right in front of us with maple syrup dripping down on it. It's so delicious. There's a butterscotch note on there. There's a pecan note on there.
Pecan for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, and you know it's coming from that wood, but this makes a terrific maple old fashioned. Oh my gosh, so good.
I got to ask you this: we've tried a number of bourbons and whiskeys on this show. With a number of different, barrel finishes and stuff. Yours seem so much more distinct from each other than many we've tried. Is there any reason that you can think of that there's such a distinct difference in the flavor of this, all with the same mash bill?
You know, I've got to give props to our bourbon consultants that have really helped us, because they've been around the industry for decades. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to separate ourselves. And what we did is we created a portfolio that cast a wide net. So if you like traditional bourbon, we've got it. If you like a complex bourbon, we've got it. If you want a wild adventure, we've got it. If you want a sweet new entrance to drinking bourbon, we've got it.
It's really fascinating. Mark, real quick, your take on this last one.
I make a maple old fashioned at the lodge, and this takes half the workout. Really,
yeah, for sure.
It's really nice. I love that rich, that cooked butterscotch that kind of comes through. Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about this a little bit more and try our final beer when we come back. It's Smoking and Toasting, craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars and dumpsters. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's Smoking and Toasting. Our show is all about craft beer, fine spirits, and hand-rolled cigars. And I would just like to point out, by the way, Mark, you do that really well. So you watched Ian, I think, and learned from his way to sort of fumbly open a bottle of beer.
Anything for the sound, right?
I would just like to point out, by the way, to those of you who are currently appealing to the NPB, the National Podcast Board, about the fact that I sang on that last segment, that it was not my choice. It was Marc Borel.
That's right. I'll take the blame.
It was Marc Borel who chose that's what he thought that I should do. We are in studio with a really cool special guest that is, I think, really kind of making the show today, in my opinion. Barry Brinegar from RD1 Spirits. Your spirits have been so delicious. They've been so distinctly different from each other. And I want to talk about that a little bit more. And I want to get to the heart of how people find you and how people find your spirits. But in the meantime, Mark has poured the blackest beer I've ever seen. We talk about beers looking like motor oil. I don't even know what this is.
Look how it coats the glass.
Oh, I know.
Molasses.
The darkest. It's like a cup of molasses almost. This is from our friends at Prairie Artisan Ales in McAlester, Oklahoma. This is their Espresso Marty. Which is meant to be like an espresso martini. And you can see, Mark, if you'll kind of show that, I know we have some B-roll, but if you'll kind of show that to the camera there, that is the espresso martini on the front of it, making a face. And you mentioned
barrel-aged Imperial Stout with coffee, vanilla, espresso, natural flavor, and caramel color.
So you mentioned how coffee and espresso martinis are becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Yeah.
Huge.
It's huge now, and it's a big deal. In fact, I had mentioned that I was on a cruise last week, and they actually have espresso martini on tap. So if it's made it into the middle of the Caribbean, it's a big deal. It's everywhere right now.
Honestly, this is just absolutely delicious. This is one of the best stouts I think I've tasted in a very long time, and we taste some very good stouts on this show here. You agree, Terry? This is like,
it's really good.
This is exemplary.
Yes, it
what
is.
do you think, Mark?
I would pour this over vanilla ice cream.
Oh yeah. If Ian were here, I think he would say he would pour it over his nipples, and they aren't even sensitive. That's one of his favorite things to say.
I think he just had an ectogasm.
Yeah. And he's in the Caribbean with Alan Denny. So you put it all together however you want to. So, Barry, your thoughts on this very interesting beer?
I love this. Oh my gosh. And go back to that maple, double oak and maple, and taste that with this. Oh my gosh. What a great pairing. It mutes the maple, but it really complements so nicely.
If Ian were here, he would say they form like Voltron.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that is.
I'll let him have that.
That is spectacular.
Yeah,
I
love it.
So I make the espresso martini at the lodge with, instead of vodka, I'm not a big vodka guy, so I use spiced rum with it. This would make a great espresso martini. Not that I would want to, go crazy with your bourbon, but I think the notes, that maple notes in there with this coffee, sing really well.
Barry, you have given us 4 outstanding expressions today. Really,
Thank you.
Really very impressive. In price range, you've given us the first 3. What is this last one? The
same as all the wood finishes. They're all $69. So $59 for the straight bourbon. All the wood finishes are $69.
So how and where can people find your bourbons, and where should people find you online?
So we are in the Texas market. You can find us as Specs. We're currently I'm getting ready to go down to Beaumont and run the Houston market.
I'm sorry, that just came out. It wasn't planned.
Hi, Mom.
It was perfect. But we're on store shelves, and if you can't find us on store shelves, just ask your buyer to bring us in.
What about other states? Where are you available?
We're in 16 markets. So we're in Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, Tennessee, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, Colorado, California. I mean, we're in a lot of markets and growing in the East Coast.
Yeah,
so
that sounds
we're super excited. You can find us online at RD1spirits.com. My name's Barry Brinegar. You can find me on the socials on Facebook and Instagram, but love to connect with you. And we're selling single barrels, so give me a call. I'm your Huckleberry.
Mark, if I want a reservation at the Rainbow Lodge, how far in advance do I need to book? Because you guys,
that depends on which day you want. I can get you in on the 12th and the 13th.
Of what, this month?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's impressive with Valentine's Day being the 14th.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Probably by the time this airs, that will no longer be.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Give me a call. I'm always there.
Yeah. If you're in the Houston area, I cannot recommend the Rainbow Lodge highly enough, especially if you have an appetite for something a little different, because their menu features not only Mark's incredible choices with wine and spirits, but also amazing choices in terms of
one of the
meat.
few places in town for antelope, elk, and buffalo.
And the elk is so good.
Wow.
It's so good. Mark, thank you for being here and
It's my
co-hosting
pleasure.
today.
Absolutely.
This has been great fun. Barry, thank you. We appreciate you being on. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you,
And your
Cruze.
spirits are wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for listening and hanging out with us. And most of all, thanks to Ian, who's enjoying a kind of crappy beer somewhere in the Caribbean. Have a great week, my friends.
Cheers.
And
Cheers.
Cheers, y'all.
Ditch that guy.